Welcome to Beyond the Box. Inside, outside, upside, downside, beyond the box.
Break it down.
Our guests are insiders, now on the outside and the right side, dropping truth and nuclear intel bombs and breaking it down just for you. And now it's time to meet your hosts and co-hosts. Your hosts of Beyond the Box are Brenda Lankarge and Suzanne Hott. Brenda Lankarge is host of Beyond the Box and retired law enforcement. Joined by Suzanne Hott, host of Beyond the Box, Joel's Indoor Arena and Event Center, and White Horse Productions. They are joined by co-hosts Tom Althouse, Brian Sang, and Penny L.A. Shepard. Brian Sang, co-host Beyond the Box, is Total Disclosure Now movement. Tom Althouse, co-host Beyond the Box, is the real author of The Matrix, The Immortals, and The Matrix Redeemed.
Break it down.
And Penny L.A. Shepard, executive producer and co-host of The Awake Nation, Dark Outpost, Patriots Perspective, and Beyond the Box. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Inside, outside, upside, downside, beyond the box. Beyond the Box begins now.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the 17th episode of Beyond the Box. Tonight we have a special guest, Mr. Tony Rodriguez. Today is March 15th, 2024. Boy, I forget what day it is. So first, let me go ahead and bring out all my co-hosts, my favorite faves. I have got Penny L.A. Shepard, our executive producer. I got Brian saying hi, Brian. And I have Tom Althouse. Y'all doing okay?
We're all doing it. Yes, excellent. We're going to have a super guest who both Brian and I are very well acquainted with. He's going to be speaking at your conference. Is that correct, Brian?
That's right. Tony is Mr. Rodrigues, and I've got both of his books here, and they're great, and they're really, I'd say, foundational books to what some of us call the Full Disclosure Now movement. So, yes.
Excellent. And you want to tell us just a little bit about him?
Yeah. The way I was first acquainted with Tony and his work is when he was on Journey to Truth with Tyler Koala and Aaron Kuhn several years ago. And he gave one of the most coherent, cogent testimonies, not only about secret space programs, but also about 20 and back time travel technology. And, that really hit me because after he said it, other people were coming out, or they had come out before him. But, and I tracked them down, finding them using the interwebs and listening or reading about their testimonies. And, it was just too much of a, it wasn't, 3 years and back or, different variations. It was always 20 and back. And then later on, I learned more about 40 years and even 60 years and back from Penny Bradley. So that's, I don't want to go too much, Tony's testimony, but that's really why I consider him, not only a friend, but why he's important to all of us.
Yes, and he is also acquainted with the Super Soldier program. That is correct. And so we'll have him define what that is. And also, Tom and I are extremely interested in divergent timelines because the timelines have been altered. And Tom and I have a segment that we're doing on the Awake Nation It's called the Dream Team, in which we discuss dreams and movie decodes. It's Matrix meets Stranger Things. With that, why don't we bring in our guest?
Yes.
Hi,
Hello,
everybody.
Tony.
Good evening. Good evening.
Yes,
Thanks
it
for
is.
having me. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can. And it's very good to have you. I know that you've been a guest on our show, The Awake Nation, and this is a brand new show that I was actually asked to be executive producer of, because my best friend in the world, I trust two people, actually more now, Tom. My sister Susie, I call her my sister Susie. She's my best friend, and David Zublik, who I work with and is my partner. And we're building teams of people that we can bring in and build longevity with, that we can speak with one another and gain that trust, because I know now that trust is earned. It's not simply given away. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Tony.
Um, well, gosh, I don't know where to start, really. I'm a normal guy. I've raised a family of 3 daughters. I'm from Michigan originally,
Really?
and
I did not know that.
yeah,
That's
Ann
where
Arbor,
David
Michigan's
is.
my hometown. Yeah, really.
Yes.
Yeah, I grew up around there until I was until about 2007, and then moved out of state after the recession, moved the family away, and then came back in 2016. But while I was gone, um, I had an ET abduction experience when I was young. I was 10 years old. We're talking 1982. And I always remembered the initial 30 minutes or so of the event. So those memories didn't get erased. But what happened subsequently from that did get erased. And I recovered those memories in May of 2015. So there's a few reasons why I may or may not have been the underlying cause of how I got my memories back. But basically, I remembered a great deal at once. In one chunk, I remembered 20 years of things and was overwhelmed at the time. So what I did was I went online imagine waking up tomorrow and remembering living in a town that you've never heard of for 2 years of your life. Remembering 20 years of things and remembering places you lived on Earth, um, Southern California, Seattle, and now one of the islands around Seattle, Peru, down in Peru, that you've never heard of in your entire life. There's a lot of places in the United States that no one's ever heard of. I live currently in Cadillac, Michigan, and I bet a lot of people don't know about it. Don't know it exists. They can't describe it to me.
Is that what they made Cadillacs?
Nope, it's really not.
Just asking.
It's named Cadillac. I don't know how it got the name, to be honest, but it's not a factory. It is a factory town, but it's not a Cadillac place.
It might have been Cadillac Indian tribe.
Is that an
Could have
Indian
been.
tribe?
It might have been.
More on that
Yeah.
later.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's a small town. My point is that if you guys have never heard of it, most people listening or watching this have never heard of it and don't know it. And that was what happened to me. I woke up with intimate memories of towns that I'd never heard of. And I went on the map and found them. And I went, oh my God, it's exactly how I remember it.
Wow.
And I had intimate knowledge. I knew my way around the roads. I knew the fishing spots. I knew where the buildings were. I knew the buildings that were there that are gone now, that they were there in 1982 and 1983, and now they've moved. And I went back and proved it. So I was able to go back and film documentaries on location and called out things that there's no way that I could have known.
Right.
So, I mean, no matter what you say about my testimony, these things can't be dispelled easily. So these are things that, because I understand that when you start talking about working on a UFO for 12 years in space with giant insects and aliens and traveling to other galaxies, when you start talking about things like that, it sounds very grandiose, and there's a giggle factor that people roll their eyes. But the fact is, there's things I remember about space that got confirmed as well, like the white spots on Ceres, and that they were made out of salt. I called out in 2016, late 16, and it wasn't confirmed by NASA until 2020. So that's another thing. Like, how could I have known that? So I'm always one to entertain and say I wish the things I remembered weren't true to a certain extent, because it means that there's a lot that we believe that's wrong, and it means that there's a lot that's going on in the world that we are not privy to, and that there's a great scope of existence of the human experience that we're locked away from. And so if my memories are correct, those things are true. And a lot of people don't want to admit it. They don't want to embrace it. So I've lost friends over it. I've lost family members over this, coming publicly with out with my testimony. My kids were ridiculed in school. I saw your dad on YouTube. And, there's a price to it. But the fact is, there hasn't been another story, a better version of what I remember that makes sense. It just makes sense that what I do remember is true. The things I remember are true, and that we have millions of people in the solar system in existing colonies that have been being built for the last 100 years. And so that's the reality that I remember. And a lot of the things that I remember lifestyle-wise, we're seeing pushes to install in our modern society now. So the smart city existence, the chips, total surveillance, paperless money, walletless money. We're seeing things that are coming down the pipe that are exactly how I remember living back in the 90s in space on the Ceres Planetoid, Ceres Colony Corporation. So how's that? I was supposed to tell a little bit about myself.
Yeah. So when did you write this book?
So it's a great question. So the first book, Ceres Colony Cavalier, is basically the linear account of what happened to me from the moment I was abducted into the space programs and the times on Earth. It's very, I don't recommend to read it. I tell people it's not a PG book. It's a very difficult read. There's a lot. If you read the reviews first, there's some negative reviews, but there's like 700 great reviews of it. And a lot of people were unsuspecting for the brutality that was in the book. It's very brutal. But I wrote that book. We published it. I think we hit publish on 21 January 1st, 21. I'm pretty sure that's when it came out. And then Star Maker in 22, January of 22, if I'm saying that right. I could be wrong. But I worked on it like 6 years. It was very difficult to write the book and recount bad things that happened to me.
Yes.
The abuse that I went through. It was very difficult. I'd write a paragraph and mope around for a while being depressed. And so I finally had people volunteer to help me. A girl named Andalara did transcription for me. And then a brilliant girl named Jackie. They're both brilliant women. But Jackie Kenner, Jackie Pierce at the time, was very gifted and helped me edit the transcription, and then finish the parts that were missing and publish the book. And after that, she took great interest in the story and the underlying story of Project Star Maker and added her own chapters. And we put Star Maker out the next year. So currently working on 2 more books.
I'd like to read a little bit from the intro. One of the things that researchers look for in determining the validity of witness is their motivation in coming forward. Tony had nothing to gain but everything to lose in sharing his traumatic experiences as a sex slave and a slave in a secret space program. At the time, very little was known about the Dark Fleet, aka Nachtwaffen, and how they treated personnel. The first public reference to the Dark Fleet was by Corey Goode, who listed it as one of the 5 secret space programs that he was familiar with in early 2015. By the way, in 2015 was when I started awakening, and I left my husband in 2016, who is now dead. So thank you, God. The existence of a Nazi-linked secret space program was subsequently confirmed by William Tompkins later that year. William Tompkins lived in San Diego, and I found it interesting when I researched him, because I lived in San Diego, that he had his funeral eulogy in Old Town, where my husband's father was a sheriff, and he built the Sheriff's Museum in Old Town. So I'm wondering, did my family know William Tompkins? And then also, William Tompkins, when he died, he had just, like the previous month, he had gone to a UFO disclosure incident, and then he fell down the stairs and died of a brain bleed, which I found very interesting. And more in this, what I'm reading, because my eyes are getting big, both Goode and Tompkins said that slave labor was used extensively by the Dark Fleet. This was a startling confirmation that Albert Speer's book Infiltration in 1981, detailing Nazi plans for a post-war Europe in which slavery would be used as a permanent solution to labor shortages, had been secretly implemented in Antarctica and clandestine space operations. Now, I just want to make a comment here, because I believe that my first handler, his name is Jarrell is the illegitimate son of Albert Spears. So you've already shaken me in the intro. Can you address the
Well,
dark fleet?
that particular intro was written by Dr. Michael Salla. So he's the one that gave that forward in the book, kind of an intro. There was another forward put in there. I forget who wrote it, and then I wrote a forward as well. But basically, yeah, that's my story. Is I was slave labor. I was taken into the programs by a family that had access. I rubbed elbows in my grade school with another boy whose father had access to these programs, and that's how I was discovered. I wasn't groomed for the service. So a lot of people that are taken in these programs are groomed from even from birth, even prenatally. They're altering people to be ideal for the jobs that they need them to do in these programs.
Are they
And so that wasn't
genetically
the case.
designed that way, Tony?
Well, they're genetically groomed sometimes. So I've also found that a lot of people, let me reel it back a little bit. But yes, to answer your question shortly, yes, absolutely. Genetics come into play with a lot of the technologies they use. Some of the travel technology and some of the medical technology to regress you and put you back to your original state that they found you in is dependent on genetic markers that not everybody has. For one. For two, people that have come forward to me after I've been public. I went public in 2016 with my story, and people, it's generated more and more interviews and shows and such. And each time people contact me afterwards, that's why I generated the website, Tony Rodrigues. I was swarmed with people. I couldn't keep. I was working a 9 to 5, and every day I was getting emails from people that say, "Man, I think I've been through the same thing. Can I talk to you, please?" And so now there's a fee on there because it just weeded out. People were abusive, and there was just so many. I'm upwards, and since 2016, I'm up around 2,500 people that I've talked to in that
Good
capacity
God.
that feel that they've experienced the same thing. And what I found is that when I ask, one of the first questions I ask is, "Have you had military service? Mom, dad, uncle, grandpa in the military?" And overwhelmingly, most of the time, the answer is yes. That my dad was he wasn't in the military, but he was a contractor for the army, and they did some secret stuff. And so these are people that are taken. It's not because strictly on the genetics, but once these programs know that I have the genes in me, for instance, then they're going to keep an eye on my kids. They know exactly how well I performed, and if they need a role to be filled, they're going to go and look at the offspring. That's why they put people back. There'd be outcry of people. Just if a million people disappeared into space overnight tomorrow, there'd be an investigation. But they can take us and put us right back in a vampiric way, use us for 20-year increments for slave labor or skilled labor, whatever it is. They can delete your memory, they can reprogram you and put you back. And then you have offspring, and it's a never-ending supply of personnel. And if you really look at the way the world's ran, the most expensive thing from all the corporations is labor. The most expensive cost is manual labor. So, and it's true in the future. And they wouldn't need robots. People are far more skilled, far better than an AI robot to do tasks. We heal
Brian?
automatically. We're very energy efficient, and we're very good at what we do.
May I add
What's that,
something
Mark?
to that, Tony?
Yeah.
I was going to say, and it's not just they don't want people to freak out if like a million children disappeared a year or whatnot. It's not that they aren't, but it's also that I'm finding or learning from people with testimonies that, once they put you back, now they can take you back for other programs can come and take you and harvest you. So there are people who are still being taken apparently to this day. This is an ongoing thing, but now every time they take you, now you've had more skills or more training and more things added on. So by that rationale, you become more valuable over time.
Now,
Absolutely. So it's
I
consciousness
have a
is what they're borrowing.
I have a question. So when they take you, you're young, and then
I was.
when they bring you back, how long in this time were you gone? I mean, like, did your parents like walk in and say, "Oh my God, he's gone," or did they not know?
So the best I can tell, it was April 15th, 1982. It was a Wednesday that the boy at school, his father came in to the science fair and he pointed me out to him. It was a Wednesday morning. That's the boy I told you about, Dad. And he said, "Oh, we'll take care of him." They had some weird conversation. Thursday night, I had a gray ET in my room with other short reptilians that carried me out late Thursday night with lights outside and the telephone ringing. And I woke up in my bed Friday morning and I felt like I hadn't been home in 20 years. I felt I was completely disoriented, did not recognize my toys in my room, nothing. So it was in that it was in the space of that night. I was taken at some point in the night and put back shortly after. So my parents never knew I was gone. I didn't know I was gone. I went to school that day and forgot my way around the school. It wasn't a big school, but I forgot where the bathroom was. I raised my hand, asked the teacher to go to the bathroom. I said, "Where's the bathroom?" She called my mom and said I might have amnesia. I was completely disoriented and a completely different person the next morning when I woke up, and I was never the same since. So yeah, they can take you and you can be gone for 30 or 40 minutes. I've talked to other people that were gone for a day or two because they had to sign a contract and agree to it. So they
Now,
sat and mulled around on the moon base, and
now
then
would
went in.
they? I'm sorry. Would they take people on and off while they were growing up? I mean, and not let them remember things, because I remember nothing of my life till I was 5. And then I remember 5, 6, 7, 8. I do not remember anything again until I was 14. And my
So
uncle
it's not
was
uncommon.
big military. My dad was military, everything.
It's not uncommon for people to not remember big chunks of their youth. So many people are like, I don't remember anything before 9 years old. So it's not uncommon, whether that's a natural occurrence or people that are just in the program. I don't know. But yes, they absolutely do take people, do medical things, train them, keep them for a week or two, put them back with the same technology, wait a few years, take them again, do the same thing, and then take them for the long haul. So
And
I've talked to many people where that's the case.
and I've met my share of reptilians. I've been down in Area 51, so I didn't grow up around any of this stuff. I mean, I grew up around all this stuff, so nothing really surprises me. I just get angry because I've lost so much of my life and I can't pull it back in. I try, but it doesn't seem to be working. So I was just kind of curious if they did it like through periods of time, as you were growing
Absolutely.
up.
Well, many people are taken, so there's a lot of different reasons they're taking people. So my particular one was labor, slave labor, and I was into several programs. It was more of a punishment. Some people are groomed. There are breeding programs, there are medical programs, there are other programs where you're used for short periods of time to train for training for purposes, on and on. Genetic programs. And the scope, it's not just the United States military, it's not just the secret space program or the Nazi Germans. It's not just one program that has access to us. When you really look at it, I've broken it into 3 categories with all the people that I've worked with. The first category being human-based space programs. So the United States military, the Germans, the Nazis or Deutsch, whatever you want to call them. There's an Asian program, there's a Canadian, there's a UK program. These are human-based space programs, and they take people for what seems like a military service. Category 1. Category 2 is the nearby conglomerate of worlds, which is the Orion group. So the big reptilians, and they basically have dominance in our area of space, our region of space. They seem to have a same MO. So people that are taken by them directly have the same kind of common denominators of what their experiences. In the third category is everybody else. So we have the space is very populated with many advanced civilizations, and they all have access to us. They can fly. We can go to from here anywhere in the galaxy or to a neighboring galaxy and back in the same day. It's not a long flight like Hollywood would talk us into believing. Like it's a long ways to get to the next star or weeks away. We went to several stars a day, and we're back home in time for lunch. And so all of these literally trillions of species that come from different galaxies and this one can breeze here, come down and interact with us for any reason, with any level of technology. So they're not all the same level of tech either. They have higher levels of technology, lower levels of technology. They come down and take people and interact. And when a researcher goes and compares one to the other, it looks like gibberish. It doesn't make any sense, because they go, well, everybody else has had this military level with the reptilians, and you're telling me that there was a spiritual thing that fixed your teeth and gave you a baby, and you know what I'm saying? Like, there's a lot of different reasons and a lot of different technologies at play here. We need to understand that the scope of space and the civilizations in space is near infinite, and that they can all get here and go home in a day. That it's instantaneous travel very, very far. So we have that many worlds interacting with us. And you may be taken by a military program, and then a more advanced species knows you were taken and take you for their program to see what that military program did. So there's a lot of different reasons why people are being taken, and it tends to be in the family because of the genetic aspect of it. And who knows? And there's in this community, a lot of people will tell you they're a starseed, that I'm incarnated here from another world to come and help you guys. That's a common thing. The starseed narrative is real. So people are coming here because we're at a transitional time in our world, and that's the deal. So we are much more than what we think we are in just one lifetime.
I've got another comment. I'm sorry, my dogs are barking in the background. And in furtherance of reading in the intro, in one of our 2014 interviews, Randy said that he'd encountered some of his clones and had to train them. Apparently, it was no big problem to technologically transfer consciousness into a clone body in the case of irreparable injury or death. And they have been doing this. That's what the Uber super soldier was that Hitler and Joseph Mengele offered to the world. And also Michael Aquino was involved in the transferring of, and so was Max Spears, involved in the transferring of his consciousness, uploading it and then downloading it into another individual. It says, according to William Tompkins, cloning had been first developed by the Antarctic Germans with the help of draconian extraterrestrials. After the U.S. and the Antarctic Germans had reached agreements in the mid-1950s, it's not surprising that cloning technology was adopted for use in deep black projects, which involved a high incidence of death among super soldiers fighting extraterrestrials. Using clones while preserving the original bodies in stasis chambers meant highly trained and expensive super soldiers could be used again and again in covert space warfare. Did you have any interaction with your own clones or other people's clones?
So no interaction with my own clones. Anytime I'm awake next to I believe the whole process revolved on cloning. So the early project that I was involved in California, the very first place I woke up was in Inyokern, California, in a grill flame project that really lines up to a lot of paperwork and declassified documents I've found. It was remote viewing and psychoenergetics research. In fact, that's the substance of my next book I'm working on, hopefully to be released at the end of April. But when I woke up, he asked me if I had any memory of where I came from, and I said no. He said, that's because you're a clone. So it's as if they cloned me, but they took my consciousness and put it in the clone to drive it. And at the end of 20 years, put it back in time and killed it and put my consciousness back and then sent me on my way home.
Sense.
So the memories were waiting. The memories were waiting for me in the original body, and the memories of the clone were deleted, but somehow kept somewhere else because I did acquire them eventually. So, yeah, I think cloning is pivotable. Pivotable. That's not a word, but it's fun to say. I believe cloning was pivotal in the process. Yeah, I think it was what the process was about. I think that when they clone somebody, it's like a kind of a dummy, doesn't have the same spark, and they had a technology that could take the consciousness out of me and put it into the clone.
This would be on another world, Tony.
There were two of me on Earth, so I was listening to the radio in 1986 at a party in Seattle, the same time that I was listening to the same music in 1986 in my home in Michigan. There were two of me at the same time, and I looked exactly like me, and I lived through the 80s twice on Earth, and it sucked both times for me.
Right, I bet. I didn't even like clothes.
A lot of people ask if it was like a dream, astral travel, or something. It was physical. I was able to find newspaper clippings of the parties we were at in Seattle. There's record of it. All the people that I remember, check out. There were two of me.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Dark Fleet?
Yeah, so I remembered it called the Midnight Fleet. They had many names because if they ticked off an AT race, then they could change their name real quick. So they didn't want to
Okay.
leave a calling card of where they were from. Our mission, I was on a cargo ship, a smaller cargo ship, and our mission was to acquire technology by any means necessary, be it from trade for goods, trade for tech, or theft. And so it was by any means necessary. They did not want to leave their calling card. They called it 0 hour, which represented the ability to travel time, that they had time travel. So every hour was zero. Whenever they showed up, it was 0 hour. That was their like a motto, like one of the, like the military group motto, 0 hour or midnight fleet, Midnachtwaffen, Midnacht. It doesn't translate right, but yeah. So it was coined Dark Fleet by some people that want to coin everything and sue everybody that uses their words.
I know
So
who you're speaking of. We will mention no
well,
names.
that's not exactly the case. It was, I always thought it was the Midnight Fleet. So that was my memory of what it was called. But yes, and specifically, so it was, you know, a branch of ships or a fleet of ships that had many different bases. And the Ceres Colony Corporation had ships that were part of the fleet, but it was an independent colony. So the Ceres Colony Corporation had its own rules, its own laws, its own governance, and the ships were part of the Midnight Fleet or the 0 hour.
Were these ships in intergalactic spheres? Were they able to dimensionally travel?
Yes. The ships had three. The ship I was on had three engines. It had three modes of engine. It had the ability to create its own bridge. They called them bridges, not portals. And
Okay.
they called them bridges. And we said we're going to bridge to system whatever XYZ, and then we're going to stay there and meet, and then we're going to bridge out, and we're going to bridge to another one. It had an engine for that. Then it had an engine that went A to just A to B, like a anti-grav motor that would fly it. It could fly from Ceres to the Earth, depending on where the orbits were lined up, in about 4 to 6 hours. Was how fast it could travel, so quite fast. And then it had an intergalactic engine that it needed a natural portal, a natural bridge, an anomaly in time space. They occur naturally throughout the galaxy, and it would fly to one of these, and it could go to a nearby galaxy by using that.
Now, I got to ask here, Tony, did 0 hour or Dark Fleet ships have the capability to use the portals in our sun, or is that above our?
No. So the one that I was on, no, it could not get. There were times when we parked closer to a star, and they would open the window so you could see it, but no, we couldn't get very close to stars. So our ship did not have that capability. But we were a trade ship, so I'm very aware that there were other more advanced ships in the fleet besides ours.
Tom, did you have any questions about time travel for Tony?
No, I'm way open on that. So anything about travel is very interesting to me because I've had this feeling that there's actually time travel tourists that come back to main events, and sometimes it feels very crowded around people. So it's like it seems like that would be a thing in the future. Was like time travel tourists and where you can't interact, but you can be around the parties. Yeah, I would like to know.
Very interesting. So they had rules around time travel. The ship did do anti-telephone missions. It was called anti-telephoning, and when they would aggressively schedule an aggressive mission, and if it didn't work out, they could anti-telephone and cancel the mission before they left and not lose the ship. They told us there were rules to it that they could not. They tried in the beginning when they acquired time travel to go back and alter major events, and they were punished by beings that policed the timeline, so that there were punishment involved. But there were loopholes, and it was the ability to travel time, and there were ways around it. So as far as tourism, I was unaware. I was really slave labor. I didn't get to do a lot of the fun stuff, or even it was the last 2 years I was up there before I had any kind of money in my pocket to go and get on a train and explore the colony. So I basically lived like a prisoner for most of my time up there. But there was a lot of things like that. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a tourism, or at least a version of it that's holographic or invisible or something like some version of that. But time travel was with the same exact technology to bridge space, they could bridge time. And we were aware that it was the output of the engine, the output of the generator of the engine. They were in the petawatts, was the power of the ship was in petawatts. And the battleships, the warships had much more power output. They could bridge farther in space and farther backward or forward in time. So the amount of power output was what determined how far back in time they could go.
Hey, Tony,
That's about all I know of that.
I got to ask you. So then, because I've heard about these outfits that police, the timelines to make sure no one's messing with the timelines too much. What does it look like when they come and punish an outfit like, say, ICC or whoever?
The instance that I was heard when I asked about it, I was walking with an officer through the ship. I was walking and asked, "Why don't you just go back in time?" And I forget what the incident was, and he was explaining they couldn't do it. And he said when they first did it, that one, like the president or they called him the Führer. They called Führer, the leader of the colony, was taken and lived for 1,000 years in a miserable existence, like in a punishment, and then they put him right back to the same instance. It said, "Don't do it again; it'll be worse," and that was that. And so that's all they had to do was punish somebody that time. Like it's an excruciatingly long punishment, and just to that person. So it was very effective. So they did experiment with ways so that they could eventually do the anti-telephoning. There was a trick to it, but for the by and large, their time travel is very heavily policed.
I find that to be poetically beautiful. That's poetically beautiful.
Now, everybody said something about like the super soldier program. What is that about exactly? Do you know?
Well, there's a lot of different layers of the militaries that are up there as far as soldiers go. I think super soldier is a blanket term that we've coined for the program for people that are taken into the programs and do a military service. Like I was a support soldier for a short term. I was in an experimental project on Mars that we were trying to be support soldiers for the soldiers there, for the Marines that were there, and they were pretty hopped up soldiers. They had a great deal of equipment. That it was a lot of resources, a lot of expense to give them what they had to use. So, but I was also aware of soldiers that were hybrids, that weren't half human. They were not humans. They were something else, like half robot, half human, and very obedient, very deadly soldiers. That we transported them on our ship from the Ceres colony. We took them to play. We gave them a ride, basically. And so there are many different layers to super soldier, to the existence of super soldiers. So there were soldiers that are a lot like that are people and had made decisions and lived like a Marine, and there were soldiers that were like a robot that had complete obedience and no rights whatsoever. They were automatons, and so there was a lot of.
Now they try to make it sound like they're just now coming out with that. They lie about so much. It's incredible.
Yeah, no, they were well established in. So when was 86? 87. So probably 88 was when I was up there. When I was on Mars, in that, so 1988, 89, somewhere right around there. So they were well established and they were very advanced at that point. So it's nothing new, and there's a lot of medical tech. There's a lot of technology they had that I was unaware of that was classified to me. I was a support soldier, and I had an environmental suit and a small rail gun. They had rail guns. They did not have laser beams. They had guns that shot a projectile very fast. Was the weapons that I remember on Mars. But they had a great deal of technology. So the super soldier, when people say just throw super soldier as a blanket term, it really is a misnomer. It's much more complicated than that.
Yes, it is.
So we use it for, to kind of get the point across of a secret space program that has soldiers that are super compared to what we're used to. But there's many layers to it. There are many,
Yes.
many layers. There are soldiers and there are personnel around them that are also in the same exact program. So it's hard to distinguish in one word.
Yes, many. I would be referred to as a super soldier. People are like, "Well, how super is she? She's wearing glasses." Seriously, did you not know that Superman wore glasses? Okay, but I am more in the psychic aspect of it. I'm not a person that can, climb a mountain. I don't have any knowledge of being able to fly a plane or fly a ship. I don't have any knowledge of having been in a 20 and back program. Maybe sometime in my life I will come to that conclusion. But at this juncture, I started waking up around 2015, like yourself. And then I started researching after I left my husband in 2016 and started finding out more about my own self. My family, I found out that my former agent is my brother, who I had an affair with in the 90s. That was just wonderful. And, and then I found out that he's been in the entertainment industry for over 50 years now, 2024. And some of his clients are Madonna, Lady Gaga, Katy Perry, Jay-Z, Beyonce, Kanye West, Taylor Swift, Whoopi Goldberg, and such. There's like 5 pages of different theatrical individuals that are on his list. And I started asking questions. I said, why does John, who I found out from my first husband, Steve Zenos, he was the one that told me he was my brother. I said, why does he look like Joseph Mengele? And why do I look like Maureen Schoenbein, who married Joseph Mengele? And why does my murdered brother David look like their son Rolf? And then when I started researching, which is why I looked at you saw my eyes going like this when I'm looking at your intro by Solace, talking about a book that was written by none other than Albert Spears, who I actually confronted Darrell, my first handler, who was also my agent, and said, because I was in an MK Ultra state, so I said it in a childlike voice, and I said, and your daddy was Albert Spears. And you know what, Tony? He didn't deny it. He didn't confirm it, but he looked at me with those eyes and he didn't deny it.
So I'm kind of unfamiliar with Albert Spears and that.
Okay, so
that group of people.
Solace mentioned him in the beginning of your intro. He talked about a book that he had written, so it's in your. Hold on, just a second.
Albert Spears was he the architect?
Yes, Albert Spears was an architect, but he was also minister of war, and he worked with Hitler, and he was an occultist, as was Hitler and all of his henchmen.
Warner Brothers and I went round and round during our deposition on this one because I have the architect in the Matrix story, and it is Hitler. And they were not happy about that, but that's why they just call him the architect. But Albert Spears, that's why you have the dome in Matrix, is because it's the dome from the 1,000-Year Reich that was planned.
And this is kind of okay.
So the
Okay, go ahead, Tony.
Oh. Yeah, go ahead, Tony. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say that about the Deutsch culture that was on Ceres Colony. That was made up it was basically a Deutsch culture, European culture. They were very proud of the 30 Years' War from 1600 to 1630, I think, or 1631. That 30 Years' War, they believed was the first time that mankind had defeated an extraterrestrial enemy. That they believed, the Ceres Colony Corporation believed that that's what that war was about. That was their version of history that they were teaching. And the 30-Year War was about the creation of the freedom of religion in Europe, because you only could be a Catholic or you'd be put to death or excommunicated or whatever. And you couldn't have any other religion other than the Catholic religion out of the Vatican. And so I really thought about that. When those memories came back to me, people asked, I really thought about it and did some research. But what happened right before the 30 Years' War I think it was 1575 or 1580, was the Nuremberg
Yes.
sky battle.
Yes.
the wood carving with all where they saw all the ships have a battle in the sky. All these UFOs
Yes.
popped up, blowing each other up. And so this was just before that war and before the Vatican really took over. Well, I mean, all through that time, the Vatican was really expanding, and Europe was basically forced to be Catholic. But that war was the people fought back and won the right to. They created the Amish culture. They created the Protestant religions, and then it branched off across Europe. But the Ceres Colony Corporation said we did it with horses. We beat an ET force with horses. That was their motto, and they were very proud of that. So when you think about the history since then and what that culture was going after and how they ended up embracing psychic abilities and science and merging the two to get into space before everybody else. I'm not trying to give them a pass. So I don't believe in slave labor any more than anybody else does. I think they have a lot of growing up to do. But it was remarkable what they did, and taking that part of history in context. There were a lot of other things. I'm in my book, in the research for my next book, I'm looking at psychoenergetic structures that the ancient Egyptians had. We all know about the pyramids and how powerful they are, the obelisks. But it looks like around 1550, there were many obelisks. The Vatican was built. There were places in Florence that were built, all in that same period of time. And then we had the Nuremberg in battle in the sky. So ETs fought ETs, and then it turned into a proxy war on the ground, all across Europe for 30 years. There were wars all over Europe until the Vatican, at the time, the Catholic Church was, I don't want to say defeated, but that policy was defeated. So there's a huge chunk.
Tony, do you think the Vatican is run by reptilians?
I don't know about reptilians, but I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, they do have a freakish amount of power for what they are, and they're sitting on a lot of the knowledge of the ancient world that would certainly change our views on history. So the Vatican is definitely a gatekeeper of our historical context. I believe that there is an extraterrestrial influence in the Vatican. I absolutely do believe that.
Historians actually say that the only nation that wasn't scathed by World War II is the Vatican. Its own country, basically. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, you know what I found interesting? When I moved to Texas, and I'm kind of in a remote location, I had to go back and I had to prove how I got my Shepherd name, last name, and then I had to go and get my wedding certificate to my second husband. And I thought, well, I'll get the one to my first husband. We were married on November 22nd, 1984, and I kept getting erased, Tony. So I had to keep going. I went back to my first husband 4 times and asked him when I was married. And so we were married November 22nd, and I remember it because I went home and I made a turkey. And so when I get my certificate, it says I was married November 25th. So I tracked down the lady that married us, and she says, "How did you find me?" And I say, "That's what I do," because we have unique psychic abilities, but also, I guess, tracking abilities. And I was used at one point. It's my belief, because I wrote a song about it, that I was used as an assassin. Were you used as an assassin?
No, like I said, the most combat I saw was as a support soldier on the field on Mars. So they were trying to put minimally trained, minimally equipped soldiers for numbers in the theater on there. So, but that's all I did. That program got canceled, and then I went into maintenance and engineering. I was promoted into cargo engineering later on in my career. But no, I didn't do anything like that.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Question for Tony is, Penny and I have been talking a lot about inserted material into films where they're putting it in plain sight. And I've been made trivia, and she has too. We've been crossed over on certain series, and it's amazing how much they stick in. What are you aware of in your situation that's been entered into any films where they put it in plain sight?
Absolutely, it happens all the time. And for a while, after 2015, I think that there was a technology that was destroyed in somewhere time around 2015, and a lot of people were going to get their memories back. I think that there was a local technology. I think that there was a warfare that broke out. We had all those underground earthquakes in 1
Yes.
month. And shortly after, many people got their memories back.
Yes.
2015, pivotal year. So they knew that people were going to get their memories back. And then we had people come out and try to say, if you had any memories, contact me. And then, then shut up about it. So they were making a list of people that have their memories, and they were spying on people. So there were a lot of times that privately I talked about technologies between people, and then it came out in Hollywood. For one. For two, I literally had Hollywood producers hand me things at conferences and say, this is for you. And then later on, somebody else say it was like a setup. And this was Hollywood. These are people admittedly from Hollywood producers.
Yes.
Many times in television and in movies, I've had people talk about things I said in my testimony and said, well, we said that and it's copyrighted. You can't. Like, it's a way to keep us quiet. So think about this. Like, I come on your show and I say, look, I'm an experiencer and I have my memories back. And okay. And I tell my thing and we say goodnight. And then somebody watching Hollywood comes and then sends me an email and then hacks my computer and keeps an eye on what I'm saying privately to people. And then they take it all and quickly put it into a show. And then they can say, we copyrighted that. That was us. He got it from us. Where's my proof? Where's their proof? I said it in a conversation and a phone call, and they have it in their patented legal script that's a copyright now. And it seems like that happened a lot. The oxygen chamber in Deadpool 2, there was an oxygen where they were taking I said that in 2016, long before that movie came out. That was one of the technologies they had. And then lo and behold, it came out in Hollywood afterwards. I don't have some kind of copyright on it. And it'd be hard for me to prove that I said it other than witnesses. And I did say it quite often. There were other things. The Expanse, the show The Expanse had a description of series that I said privately in a phone call in 2015 about the streets. The only thing I didn't say in that phone call that was real is that there were many columns in the roads, along the roads, and with the fake domed fake sky. And that came out in the show. So it was as if that was being listened to. There are the places around Jupiter, the temporal bubble around Jupiter, and what the space station inside of it looked like. That came out in other people's testimonies after I said it privately. So there's a lot of spying that goes on in this community from Hollywood. It makes a lot of sense. So number one, Hollywood's a CIA thing. We all know that Operation Mockingbird is real. But on the other hand, if you're somebody that's looking for the next best, you're a special effects, billion-dollar special effects company, and you need to know things, this is a great community to come to. People that literally lived in space and in the future, and we're talking about it privately. It's a great place to come and spy and be a fly on the wall, and then use that for your next movie. That's where a lot of this stuff comes from, and it's alive and well. Believe me, it's alive and well. And a lot of things from my testimony have showed up in shows after the fact. And so,
we thought about actually doing a movie. You doing a movie.
Yeah, well, there's a couple scripts out. People have approached me. There's a couple scripts that are based on my testimony that I gave permission to and said, yeah, go ahead. And that's how that works. It may be years before anything happens. There are scripts, there are other stories based on my testimony, works of fiction that are based on my testimony. I think it's important that we do get fiction that has the 20 and back tech. I think that we get little bits and pieces. The scene in Back to the Future when Marty woke up at the end of the show, that was like waking up from a 20 and back. He lived all those years. Oh, I thought it was a dream.
Right.
And he lived that whole adventure and went back in the 50s, Mom, and then everything was different. It was all great. It was all good. So that was the experience. That's what it's like waking up, that disorientation. Like, what happened? So that was something, like, they keep saying it. And then they program the kids to agree. The rebel forces need you. And they show little kids getting recruited to rebel, on and on and on. Hollywood has these what do you call it? These little gems of reality, of the truth of what's going on in space. And they've been doing it the whole time. When you go back into the sci-fi of the 50s and the 40s and the 30s, they were already getting ahead of things, especially in the ufology. UFOs were prevalent. They were in the daily newspaper in the 40s and 50s. It wasn't, they weren't ahead of the silencing of it back then. There just wasn't mass media. It wasn't as effective. A lot of people just didn't read the paper.
You know,
but it was newspapers.
Tony, I worked with on our show, The Awake Nation, with Tracy Torme. It's hard for me to talk about it because I'm still affected. I'll probably be affected the rest of my life. So that's just the way it is. And Tracy Torme is the son of Mel Torme, the singer. And both his brothers are also jazz artists as well. The way that I found Tracy was through his brother Steve, because one of my drummers, Craig, his last name is Pilo. We used to call him Piloweed because he smoked a lot of weed. Um, and so I saw him in Lake Havasu, and I was like, what's Craig doing there with this individual, Steve March Torme? So I started talking to Steve, and I said, you have an unusual last name. Are you related to Mel? And he says, yes, I'm his son. So then I have him on the show, and David's like, is this just kind of a lark? I'm like, dude, he's Mel Torme's son, okay? And so he makes a joke because we're talking about organ trafficking in China. And so he makes a joke, and he says, because, you know, he's a guitarist too, and he says, why organ trafficking? Why not guitar trafficking? And I'm like, okay. and then right, and then he says, you know what, I think you want my brother on your show. And I'm like, well, who's your brother? And this is how it works. When we all meet one another, we start talking, we have a dialogue, we start sharing ideas and concepts. Something wonderful is going to come from just you coming here and meeting with us all. So I end up calling Tracy. I finally get his number after like 2 months, and I call him. His car is broken down on the side of the road. He's in Escondido in California. I know exactly where he is. And I say, I would like you to be a regular on our show. He's like, are you sure? I'm like, yes, I'm sure. So Tracy Torme did the television series Sliders. He's a screenwriter. He also did Star Trek New Generation. And he said that he worked with Gene Roddenberry. And Gene Roddenberry said there's no such thing as aliens or out of space. I made it all up. Really? He said, I was so surprised, right? And so then
I've seriously doubt that. On record many times, the opposite.
Well, Tracy said that he knew him in private, and that's what he told him. He said it's made up. And, you know, Tracy had no reason to say anything to the contrary. He knew him personally. And he also said that he did the movie Fire in the Sky with Travis Walton. So he researched it. So he'd been in the UFO field for a very long time. And he has, you know, many very prolific friends. He knew Luis Elizondo, who has been targeted, who was a UFO in the Pentagon task force in the White House. And he's been targeted as well. Apparently, people that do speak out now, maybe he told that to Tracy because he didn't want to get targeted because of the things that he knew. So maybe that's why he told him that.
Yeah, I
Thoughts
don't
on
know. A lot of other people from Gene Roddenberry's personal life that said quite the opposite, that he was aware of ETs and aware of a lot of things. There's other books written on the subject matter of that. So maybe he was trying to cover up that there was certainly in this community nowadays after 2015, many people have come forward, and a lot of people, I think back in the 30 years ago wouldn't have done it. Like they were very hawkish on whistleblowers that came forward. You heard one story after another of people telling their story of being abducted or telling their stories and being silenced. Alex Collier came out in the 90s, early 90s, and he was contacted by people that told him to shut up. You know, he was silent for years because of that. Like his life was threatened, his family was threatened. So it used to be a much more hawkish thing. But nowadays there's so many people coming forward and so much, it is time for a disclosure. And so people are being allowed to tell their story, like me, are being allowed to tell it. So the landscape has changed greatly.
That's good. I mean, I think that the American people deserve honesty and truth. And we haven't had it for so long. I got to say that I would honestly believe that my parents, my grandparents, that they've always been lied to and nobody. But then you get some of my parents that were around things. I grew up with it. I knew about it. And I've always grown up knowing that this world is not what they want us to believe it is. So makes it interesting when you hear everybody. And like you said, I've lost family members over this, but I did that growing up, so it doesn't shock me none. Nothing does anymore. You could tell me I got an alien sitting on my house waving at everybody. I'd be like, oh, cool. Doesn't shock me. It's all good.
I think
So,
people are ready for the reality of ETs, but it would give their advantage away. People would aspire to join them. You know, like even it's secret. Most people don't even bother trying to get into space or trying to think about it. Like there would be outcry. So people are ready for the truth. It's just that they're maintaining their advantage by keeping it to themselves. They're just keeping it to, it's like an island space. We're an island across the ocean. They don't want anybody to know about it because that's where all the high tech stuff is, and they can
yeah,
return with it and use it.
right.
Tony, I found your opening statements pretty interesting because a lot of people talk about bloodlines as being very, very important, and I've been told that myself. But I liked what you presented, if I heard you correctly, was it's not so much about that. It's about if you've been employed or chosen into the thing and then you have offspring, and that would be the interesting thing. So it's not necessarily a bloodline. It's more if you are part of that listing where you've been employed in, and then you're of interest. Is that your take?
Yeah, well, you're on a list. So there's a few other things that are with that. So um, the premise of the MK Ultra program was Project Mockingbird, or excuse me, Monarch. After the Monarch butterfly, after the Germans made the discovery that the Monarch butterfly passes its data, its memory to its offspring. So the offspring fly back to where they originally began to migrate from. The Monarch butterfly migrates farther than it will live, and the offspring go back to the same exact place. So it's evidence that they pass their memory genetically. So these programs operate the same way. They program you and you get good at a thing, and all the memory of what you went through is passed genetically into your children. They're already smarter than you and have access to the memories of your time and space in your program. So if you're somebody that, a generation to generation, people are more skilled at the same program.
Another
So
question
there's
for you too. I appreciate that. I'm going to get your take on some things real quick, if I may. Benevolent groups, other beings that are actually feeding us ideas, tech, things where we know we're being fed stuff. And do you believe that there are some that are definitely for us, that are wanting to see us evolve a little faster, create, and have a better edge and chance?
Absolutely. I think that some groups see us and want us to grow and be their peers and grow to be something that's beneficial. And other groups want to control us as a resource and don't see us as their equals.
Does that
And so that's the
interpretation?
circle that goes on.
So do you believe that
What's that?
would the battles be some of these battles, like you talked about the 1600s or the 1500s? Okay, so you have these battles in the sky. Do we believe then that these battles are some wanting to help us, some's not, or just we're in our neighborhood fighting?
I think it's a proxy thing. I think they're here for a resource. They wouldn't have the battle in our sky. If it was just in the neighborhood, they would be out in space doing it. So I believe there are proxy things going on for, I believe that our group consciousness of mankind is far more powerful than what we've been led to believe. And we're basically like one organism that has has a right to evolve to the point where it's spacefaring, and others like us that made it there want us to join them equally, and there are others that want us to be a resource to them, as if it were a farm.
I asked that because when it came to me, like I was flooded with tech, like Neuralink, which was actually Neural Enhancer. I called it Neural Enhancer first and all those other things. I still have a lot of tech with me, but I'm not supposed to release it right now. I'm supposed to hold it back dependent on what humanity chooses, if they're going to be benevolent or not. Before I was given these things, I was given a rigorous teaching and testing thing where it wasn't about honing the knowledge. It was testing about honing the heart. And one of the things I was given directly and very clearly was I had to have true compassion, humility and things like this. It was amazing, and gave me a different take on what's in our universe and what's guiding us and what's out there. Because all this stuff came after I learned to actually have real compassion. That's amazing. So, and Hollywood often will depict, like you said, they don't call them portals, bridges, but Hollywood will call them portals. Maybe to throw us off, but they'll say that, you know, all these different shows have portals as being bad, especially for the kids. Transformers, Night at the Museum, you know, too, and all this stuff will have, don't open the portal. Oh my God, bird creatures will come through with Egyptian costumes on, or, you know, monsters from another thing that destroy us. It's always seems to be that portals are bad, fire bad, portals bad, as far as programming our kids with Hollywood. So my take was that portals maybe not be so bad. They just want us to think it's bad. And I felt like, you know, Hollywood personnel, along with the agencies, wanted to play God and didn't want us to have access to what's really there and the benevolence that might be offering us great advancement. They want to shut that door and play God. So anyway, it's just a whole lot of things I was given, but I was trained to have real compassion. And when I had that, you know, cemented down, I kept being told, you don't fit in this world, you don't belong in this world. It's like once you get that nailed down and you actually have that and know it, why is it you no longer fit in this world? It's like something's wrong.
Well, there are people that are operating subconsciously exactly like they're told to from the media and from the indoctrination. So they're a state of mind. You know, we all work together more like one organism subconsciously. Our consciousness works like that. And another thing about Hollywood and why it goes back so far was that once they got into space, once these you know, turn of the century cultures made it into space and made contact with ETs, they were aware, the ETs told them, they're very aware that when they go back to the Earth and go to sleep, all the information that they learned about space travel will get leaked to the rest of humanity because we're one subconscious. We all deal with each other subconsciously as we sleep. There's a lot of science about this. There's a lot of books written on the subject, and there's a lot of good science about it. Isaac Bentov wrote some good books about it, and the Stanford Research Institute based a lot of their research in the early 80s in psychoenergetics research about it with the CIA. What I'm saying is they would go into space and then come back, and when they went to sleep, the rest of mankind would know and go, wait a minute, you guys are going into space, we need to go too. We want to know the truth. So what they did was they made sci-fi movies. So the rest of mankind would see a movie and go, oh, that's what that was. Your subconscious doesn't know the difference. And so every now and then when they had something happen in spaceflight, they had to mirror it in reality in a form of a sci-fi movie so that the consciousness of mankind would be fooled and not look any further into the subject matter. So that's kind of what Hollywood does. That's kind of the magic that dispels it, because we all are like a collective subconscious mind when we sleep. And so the commercials that we watch, the music that we listen to, the subliminal things, it all manipulate not just us individually, but that collective mind that is what we are. So that's what a lot of the technology is based on. And it's because the ETs are fully aware how it works. And they always have been.
That's so interesting you say this, because Penny and I came up with the idea for the Dream Team thing. She came up with a great name because of how dreams are and what's happening in them. Lucid dreaming, what happens with that? Is there messages? And we thought, we won't have any wrong answers. Anybody that contributes, nothing's tagged wrong. But what's interesting in the dreaming process, it seems that we cannot hide from our true natures. Our true natures come out in the dream. So if we're benevolent people, then we'll be benevolent in our dream. We cannot be something different in a dream, it seems. Even if we lucid dream, our character shows pure. And it's interesting, like the dreams I have, I'm always, if someone's been at odds with me, in my dream, I'm hugging them, or we're working together well, or I'm back at an organization that was unjust and I'm thriving, enjoying it with the people there. It's just like, it's almost like it shows our real nature, I believe, that we are cohesive. We are wanting to come together,
Neutral.
Yeah, right. We're not trying to be at odds with each other in our
right. We're not good or bad in our subconscious mind. The post death body, the existence there is neutral. It's not good or bad. A lot. And honestly, when you look back to the media programming, everything you ever saw growing up was a bad guy that's always bad and a good guy that's always good. There's nobody that's neutral ever. Every story, every movie show, the bad guy is always bad and he's evil, and the good guy's always good and be a good guy. And also, by the way, the good guys are always poor. How's that? You know what I mean? The good guys are always, it's better to be humble and not get power and not be power hungry and stay poor. So that's the good guy in all of the portrayals in all of it for since our life. And so that's what you're programmed to believe, and that's not what it's like. It's neutrality. Duality is a great way to say it in the chat, but we're neutral. The spirit is neutral. We don't hold on to the grudges because in our spirit form we're internal. So whatever happens in this life, good or bad, isn't that big of a deal. It's an 80-year deal at best, 80 to 100 years if you're lucky. And so compared to living for millions of years, millions of incarnations across, it's not a big deal. There's nothing you can do that's a big deal at all. So the spirit world is neutral. And so that's how I see a lot of the ET interactions. So people always want to label benevolent or malevolent. It's not. They're not. It's what's good for them at the time. It's what's good for us at the time. And that's how they behave.
I agree with you totally. One of the dream trainings I had was that I was in the dream. I know it was lucid dreaming, and I was around the campfire with all these individuals I'd never really met before. And it's weird. It taught me about our programming because I was preparing my answer, the pressure of a new group, and you're going around talking about themselves, right? And it's coming your turn. So you're going to prepare your answer. Well, that wasn't what they were looking for. And when it came my turn, they said, okay, Tom, who are you? And I started in my dream listing accomplishments and jobs I did. They said, no, who are you? And I didn't know how to answer because it was always based on, what have you done? What is your job? What have you tried to do in life? And they weren't interested in anything I had done or things like that. They wanted to know, what is my core at my heart? What is my compassion element? And that's what was really a wake-up call for me, if you will, no pun intended, in the dream. So it was like really interesting that's, I believe, what it is. It's that neutral kind of thing where it's like, we just want to know your essence, what your heart is, what's your spark of love and life. And I think a lot of us don't know how to answer that question if we're going on what we've been taught in schools, how to prepare ourselves. And the reality is they don't want our resume. They want our core, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. It's what your calling is. And in one lifetime, it may be to have a big family. In the next lifetime, it may be to have a big career and no family. For instance, to be a lover or a fighter. Some people dedicate their entire lives to fighting. And, that's what their calling is for that. That's who you are this time. But, we're learning all the stations of life as we go. So these are things that I use to explain what I've gone through to myself. Like this time I was supposed to do this, and it's not going to be like this next time. I went through a lot of tough stuff. And so that's how I explain it to myself and rationalize it. So
right.
I don't want to force any kind of opinion or belief on people. I just make it known, and then everybody can make up their own mind. But these are the things that I believe.
I do too. That whatever universe. I was talking with a wonderful guy, Mike, today too, and it's like whatever universe we would be in, whatever circumstances we were in, whatever was thrown at us, we would still be that love of light spirit. We'd still be that same person in any circumstance. And often Hollywood would point out that it is the environment that shapes who we are. No, if we are who we are, no matter what the environment, I think we're on top of it. We're on our way to having those wonderful journeys where it's not the environment that shapes us. And I'm tired of psych fields saying that it is. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. And if you look at my background, I should never have been able to write the screenplays. I should have been just crumbled into a ball, like a lot of us here, like Penny, what I'm talking about. And it's like, no, instead, we survived it all. And even my mom is saying to me, how did you turn out the way you are after all you went through? And she'll even say, it's heartbreaking what you've experienced, what you went through. And I said, no, it brought me to this point. It shaped me. I have no regrets. I have no bad thoughts. I don't have nightmares. I'm thrilled that I am who I am now. And I had those experiences to bring me to this point. And so it's like, you know, we get ourselves conditioned to feel we're supposed to feel a certain way, and we need to free ourselves from that and feel whatever way we want to, you know. So it's just like, does that make sense?
So Susie has just joined us. She's been off doing some things, so I want to give her a chance to come on here and say a few things. And reminder that Susie's using her phone, so I have to keep her muted or I will echo. So when she has a question, y'all watch her because she might start dancing.
Right.
So I'm gonna let her go ahead and come on here and speak some peace. Susie.
Hey guys. Hey, hey everybody. I'm sorry. I was at a rodeo. I had to go watch a little girl run a barrel race, and so I've kind of been missing what you guys are talking about. So I'm just gonna kind of stay quiet and listen and try to follow. And then if I have any questions, I'll ask.
Okay.
So that's what I have to say for now.
Can I ask you a question? If I wanted to follow up on something Tony was saying. Basically, Tony, you mentioned how in some of these breakaway colonies, they have achieved populations of I've heard John Whitberg also cite this figure, a trillion or more. Okay, and that was possible, he said, with this time travel technology, where the breakaway Germans after World War II could use time travel technology and space travel to go back in time and establish a colony on some planet, like on another planet, but like 1,000 years ago, and then over that replenish, you know, or generate huge populations. Now, having said that, with this space battle or spaceship battle above Nuremberg, Germany in like the 1500s, was that the breakaway German colonies time traveled back to that time and that fighting was happening, or like how did that come to be?
The truth is, I don't have up or down on that, Brian. I really don't. Okay. Excuse me. I was not aware of populations that big. I was aware of populations that spanned many worlds, but in the trillions, I never heard that number of populations while I was up there. The Nuremberg battle, I had no idea who was participating in that. ETs versus ETs, as far as I know, but excuse me. That period of time, specifically the 30 Years' War from 1600 to 1630, was integral. It was like, you know, they had battle scenes of it on the back of their money. And they had horse sculptures, they had sculptures everywhere. Like it was something that they celebrated. So that was the kind of the extent of my knowledge of that period of time. So I'm kind of putting it together for myself. And like I said, I'm going to touch on some of the monuments that were built by the Catholic Church in the 1550s, just 25 years before the Nuremberg incident, and then 50 years before the war broke out. So there was a lot of things that happened in Europe. If we really look at that period of time, I'm very sure that it shaped what our life is like now and the makeup of the secret space program and these black programs that exist.
I got a question for you. Oh, go ahead. Was that me echoing? Anyway, so I have a question for you. I'm echoing something. Anyway, it seems like historians are saying that in World War II, all the activity kicked up with extraterrestrials, right? Like they said, like World War II just seemed to be a magnet. Suddenly the 40s, 50s, it was all active. Like they came to see that conflict going on or intercede or something, like the Foo Fighters, everything else. Then what's interesting, you're bringing to mind the idea that in the 1500s, whatever, or 1600s, that battle, again, that war you're describing, they say that a third of the German population was annihilated, and it took 100 years to recover. And so again, were they showing up because of the conflict? And historians are leaning that way. So I wanted to hear what you thought.
I absolutely believe that. And I believe that World War I was about money and World War II was about interstellar flight. I believe that they figured out interstellar flight and they were emboldened by it. They thought, now that we have this flight, like they didn't wait very long to establish the technologies, and they were freakishly advanced for what they were in engineering terms. When I'm talking about the Axis powers of behind Germany, and they were emboldened by the fact that they had made contact with extraterrestrials and probably had been promised quite a bit. So World War II, I believe, without a doubt, was about interstellar flight, and then the other powers wanted the interstellar flight from them. So hence the way the scientists were broke up. from Berlin at the end of the war.
Next question, follow-up, if I may, because Hollywood suddenly kicks in with the agency's heavy time in World War II. Disney is employed by CIA, and it is a big thing. You know what I'm talking about. And so what's interesting is we have this thing, which is close to my heart, that intellectual property becomes the big thing to steal, and agencies can cleanse, alter, and give to dumbed-down writers across the board. Talk to any of the writers that have been ripped off. The work is given to those people to dull it down. And it's like it's been going on for decades. And so are you noticing too that intellectual property has been something where they're almost trying to put a blanket on, shut down the agencies through the arts to keep us from learning visions that actual writers are trying to bring forward in their work? Does that make
Absolutely. It's all controlled, and when you look at the entertainment industry globally, it's controlled by very
powerful houses?
well, very unscrupulous means. So a lot of people don't, there's casting, you don't get you don't do a certain sex favor, you don't get casted for the part, kind of thing. Like it's more of a mafia than legitimate business. And the government has a blind eye, coincidentally. Like how do they not crack down on that stuff? So it is what it is. The entertainment business is owned lock, boxes, and barrel. And a lot of people, when we look at the CIA, taking the American instance, and this is a global phenomenon, all media globally. But when you look at the American example of Hollywood, and then you say, well, the CIA is in charge of it, the Operation Mockingbird. And nobody wants to believe that. They think that the CIA is this small, underfunded, secret organization. They have 20,000 employees on the books, and they have like an $88 million a year budget. Something like that is the official budget of the CIA. Dr. Sala's book, Space Force, dictates and explains the story after the 9/11 attacks of the audit that went on of the CIA. And they didn't show the income, but they showed the receipts for upwards of $1.1 trillion for one fiscal year on an $88 million budget. So how do they get $1 trillion out of that? So the CIA could write a check for Fox, CNN, MSNBC. They could just write a check in 1 year of their budget and buy all the studios out from under Hollywood. So that's the scope of the CIA and what's going on. We're talking about, the cocaine industry, all clandestine things. And that book also said that they had 24-hour space surveillance on the globe in the 70s. In the 1970s, 75, 76, the CIA had the ability to read your newspaper from space on the globe in the 70s. So think Google Earth in the 70s in real time, and they had that ability. So that means, how much money could you make with that ability, with that kind of technology? Just having everybody under surveillance everywhere all at once from space. They use that to their advantage to earn money. And so the CIA specifically and other intelligence organizations around the world are the secret space program, a branch of it working with ETs. And they're very advanced. And that's it. It doesn't take long going on the CIA declassified library.gov through the Freedom of Information Act to look at a lot of the advancement. Just go in there and put any kind of radical word, UFO, craft, free energy. It doesn't matter. Whatever you put into that prompt, you're going to get your mind blown with what comes back to you, that these guys were taken seriously 20 years ago. Sorry if I went on a little rant.
I was being recruited for Air Force intelligence. And and that's what I was, being the officer testing, everything like that. They're going to do it. But you had an interesting intro, and I'll shut up after this, but said something about 13 families. And I was very curious because when I was on Maui, the Masons on Maui, I was recruited by the Masons on Maui, and there's CIA guys in there, and they took me under their wing. And I won't say their names right now, but they took me under their wing, and they were saying, we're fascinated by your story. You're one of the elite now. We're going to give you information that's going to blow your mind. But then when I was lifeguarding on a side job, besides performing, I was lifeguarding on a side job. This guy came up, said he was part of he was a European rock star at one time. And he says, I'm one of the families. There's 12 other families besides ours. He said that. So when your intro was talking about 13 families, I was like, well, I thought he meant on Maui. So can you shed some light on what he may have been talking about? It was an opportunity.
I'm not sure. When you talk about the 13 families, there's a lot of speculation on 13 royal families, bloodlines that go back to Europe. The Medici family and others, the Rothschilds, like these big families that have owned quite a bit of the world's assets. As far as 13, but not on Maui. No, there were 5 families that I'm aware of that were wealthy when Maui became a territory of the United States. That there were basically 5: Dole, DuPont. There were a few other families that had bought the lion's share of the land on Maui.
Maybe he meant 13 agents, agents, because which are usually artists, which is kind of scary. But yeah. Okay.
Well, the 15th Space Surveillance Squadron is in the Maui Space Surveillance Complex, so it's in Maui. I'll just read you what it says. Strategically located national asset at the 10,023-foot summit of, I don't even know how to say this, Haleakala? Is that how you say it, Tom? Haleakala on the island of Maui, Hawaii. The MSSC is host to small, medium, and large aperture tracking optics, including the DoD's largest optical telescope designed for tracking and imaging satellites with visible and infrared sensors to collect data on near-Earth and deep space objects. The ground-based electro-optical deep space surveillance systems located at Maui, Socorro, and Diego Garcia are they saying Socorro in Texas?
I believe Japan.
Tony?
I believe that's in Japan. I believe that one's in Japan.
Okay, because there's a Socorro, Texas.
Yeah, I toured the AOS. I was a member of the astronomy club at the University of Hawaii on Maui, and I toured the AOS telescope. And
where's Diego Garcia?
Diego Garcia is in the Indian Ocean, and I do remember our ship doing runs there and picking up cargo. It was a black op and spaceport in the 90s that the ship I was on in the mid to late 90s was picking up cargo from Diego Garcia and taking it to Ceres Colony. And
so are you saying that this Space Force that is there now has been there for many years?
Diego Garcia has been a spaceport for many years, yes. I remember Diego Garcia immediately when I got my memories back because we used to make fun of the name of the island. Whenever we had to go there and pick up cargo, we had a little limerick where we made fun of it like a joke, like it was a American base with an Italian first name and a Spanish second name in the Indian Ocean. We were picking up Russian cargo off a Chinese ship and an American air base with an Italian first name and a Spanish second name in the Indian Ocean for some Germans. Like we had that running joke. We'd always start cracking up when we were on our way, when that was our next stop.
Did you know Mark DiMizio, Tony? Because he's testified to having a horrible time at Diego Garcia base.
I've met Mark and spent some time with him. He's a good guy. And absolutely. He has recall of serving and being imprisoned underneath there's a massive underground complex there. And he was in prison down below that there's people that live there permanently. That's Mark's testimony. I'm unfamiliar with that. I remember picking up cargo there, and specifically that it was Diego Garcia, that our spaceship came from Ceres Colony Corporation and picked up cargo there, military goods specifically.
Now, real quick, I found out Cadillac was a French governor in that area, and so it wasn't an Indian tribe; it was a French governor, probably messing with the Indians. And then I wanted to ask you, Tony. You mentioned the topic of psychoenergetics, and with the remote viewing, and I've heard the Farsight Institute folks describe this quite a bit. Is you can even go forward or backward in time, go to that event, and even interact with those beings, because it turns out time and space don't really exist and it's all connected, right? And I believe there's a point in your testimony where it seems like remote viewers with the Farsight Institute might have interacted with you while you were on one of your 20 and back. Is that what happened? And then that might have affected your ability to recall here and now?
the Farsight Institute, Courtney Brown read my book. Dr. Courtney Brown read my book and had his viewers do a session on me, and they confirmed a lot of things that were in the book in their viewing. During the viewing, one of the viewers, Yemi Janae, who's very talented, very beautiful girl, very talented remote viewer, um, contacted and remote viewed the moment that they were trying to erase my memories that they were programming, and she went in and did something. It was like she was there at the moment that it happened during the time I was put back, and said that she would bury my memories where nobody would find them, and so that they wouldn't be able to do it. And that was something that happened. So how that happened and what exactly effect that was, I mean, I don't know, but it is something. She did describe the moment that they were erasing my memories accurately. So during that time, I watched the film, and it was impressive. And since then, I've met them, and the Farsight Institute is a great remote viewing resource, and they really pushed it because I think a lot of people are unaware that everybody can remote view, and when you can access outside of time space. And it's right, you're not bound by time or distance when you remote view. So I have a small remote viewing group on my Patreon. I have a Patreon groups that I do. We do remote viewing and remote influencing and study it. It's been a wild success. In fact, that's the core of my next book I'm writing, is a brief history of remote viewing, and it's interweaves with my testimony of being in the Project Grow Flame in Inyokern in 83, 82, April of 82 till 83, where I went to Peru and was active in the field as a remote viewer, running drugs from Porto to Huantansuyo, Peru to Santa Marta, Colombia. Now that's a mouthful in the story. It might be confusing, but it's described in the book series Colony Cavalier. And I went to the place in Yokern last year and uncovered a great deal of paperwork and evidence and memories of my time there. So I'm going to try to encompass that all in the next book so it makes sense, because I think it's very important. I found, it sounds crazy, the stuff I'm saying, but I got evidence. I keep finding evidence. So I'm trying to present it in a way that doesn't get deleted in the stroke of a key.
Tony, Susie has a couple of questions, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute her, okay?
Sure.
Go ahead, Susie.
Okay. One of the questions, Tony, what year did you get taken for the 20 years? What year was that?
1982, April 15th, thereabouts, 1982.
Another question was, did they put you in a cloned body? Is that right? Your consciousness, your soul?
As best I can tell. So that's my best guess. It seems to make the most sense because I woke up with amnesia, lived for 20 years, and then was put back, and I had all my original memories back and didn't remember for 20 years. So that's my best guess, that it was a clone.
Right. So you just spent 20 years only. You didn't go any more time back, right? As far as you know, right? Okay.
No, I was told by them that particular technology was capped at 20 years, because any longer than that, and you ran a high risk of having mental problems, psychological problems when they put you back. So it was a safety measure to go 20 years only. And then some people had the genetics to go 20 years, and then they'd wait 20 years and then go another 20 years. They needed a genetic marker to let them do that I did not have it. I could go for one 20-year term.
Now you went to South America and you also went to the moon. Is that right? Did you remember going anywhere else or?
Yes. So I went to Kern, California, then Seattle, Washington, one of the islands near Seattle, then to Peru, then back to Seattle for 2 years, and then to the moon, and then to Mars, and then to Ceres Colony Corporation, where I worked on an interstellar trade ship. And we went all over after that. So on the ships that I worked on, went sometimes 4 or 5 stops a day. And by stops, I mean star systems.
The other question I had was, I'm sure you came across reptilian beings and other alien beings. What other alien beings did you encounter?
We did an away mission. I was on a planet with an away mission with the beings that were short. They looked almost like rat people. Like they had a tail, like they had the fur, and looked like kind of like an Asian face. Looked very humanoid, and they were in the technology like we were back in the 50s. Looked like they had vehicles and buildings that looked like what we had in the 50s, and we were there trying to arrange a trade deal with them and left. There were many different species that came onto Ceres Colony that came there to trade or be visitors. There were large blue people. There were large humanoid people with big eyes that had strange proportions, long hair. They had straight long hair. There were big beady-eyed looking ones with the elongated skull that had very wide hips, and they were about 9 feet tall. There were reptilians. There were tall ones. There were black, shiny reptilians that we went to another world and visited. There were big reptilians that we didn't see, we heard about, and they had taller ones that were their like their personnel, like their secretaries that would come out and interact with you. There were short reptilians, there were grays, there were short grays, tall grays. There were humans that looked exactly like us that lived their entire life on other worlds that came to visit. They were just like us. There was absolutely no way to tell any difference at all that they were from another world. There were aquatic people. There were cat people that looked almost like had cat whiskers. They were handsome and ugly and fat and skinny. The grays that are often depicted, the thing that's wrong about the way they depict them is that you could tell their faces different. They have individual faces. And so when you see them in Hollywood, they all have the same face. It's the same face. But in reality, they had different faces the same way we do. And that's what I remember of the ETs and the grays that were up there.
Did you ever encounter any
Now,
black
also-
goo? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I don't think so, Brian. To my knowledge, no, I don't believe so.
Okay.
So also, did you ever have to work under Michael Aquino? Did you know Michael Aquino? I heard that he was a very black man that wore a red robe.
No, I don't remember having any contact with him whatsoever.
Okay.
And that's probably a good thing for you, Tony. I've heard that you don't want to have run into him in the programs, and that would make sense given that he was more on the military rogue faction side of things, and it sounds like they had Tony enslaved to do more the less military stuff.
So the programs are very big. So the secret space program and the infrastructure on Earth is very big. I mean, we're talking about millions of people. So when people come forward and they say they knew everybody that ever came forward, it doesn't make sense to me. It's very unlikely that we all met each other. It's a very big program. I'm trying to put it in a way, to the way that makes sense. But somebody that goes to a baseball game didn't meet everybody at the baseball game. There's too many people there. And the space programs are like that. There are literally millions of people, and they're all over the place up there. It's very spread out, very well developed by now. And so it's very unlikely that one experiencer would have met 10 other experiencers that are talking about it. I have met people in my life that I knew up there. There is a phenomenon where you kind of find people that you knew. But by and large, mostly no.
Okay. Susie, were you done asking any questions, or does anybody else have anything else for Tony?
I have a question for you, Tony. It's like, if I'm writing a screenplay about this, there would be relationships between my characters and other people in the screenplay. So your travels, not going again, in your travels, was there any particular being, individual, or something you got very close to that?
Absolutely. I had relationships up there. Yes.
So could you talk about one of those?
Yeah, I was very deeply in love when I left. I think that's the main reason I got my memories back. is I was in the, a relationship. You have that honeymoon phase, and that's where I was. I was very deeply in love with a girl when I was up there, and I did not want to leave, but it was my time to go. And I didn't want to forget. So I kept telling myself, I'm not going to forget her. I'm not going to forget her. And I think that that's one of the things that motivated me to retain my memories at some point. I wanted to during the whole process. And so, yeah, I mean, I had friends. I worked a job. It was a lot of time up there. You're talking 20 years. So there were friends. There was camaraderie, even though it was many times it was a terrible laborious position. That you find ways to have a life. And yeah, I had relationships. I woke up the next day when it was over back in 1982 in fourth grade, and I went to school, and I was 10 years old in the 80s. I didn't have access to pornography or any kind of erotica or anything. And all of a sudden, the next day, I was attracted to adult women because I was an adult. I had lived it and went back. So it was a very disorienting thing to experience, to go through when I went back, because I was still a child, but I had adult tendencies, and it was very difficult.
Wow. So when how long did it take you to kind of get things straight? Now I have echo. I mean, to sit back and think and know, okay, I'm this child. How did this happen? At first, were you like, was I dreaming? What happened?
Well, I never got things straight. I was very emotionally damaged afterwards, and it really derailed my life. Who knows what things would have been like, but it wasn't until um, 2015. So 82, 92, 2002, 33 years later. It was 33 years before I got my memories back. So
Wow.
that's the I was an adult. I was already a father and married and had moved, like I had already had established life, and then I got the memories back. It all came at once. I got an MRI scan, and I saw that I didn't put this together at first. I got my memories back and didn't know why. And then a year later, somebody told me to read the Mars records because it was similar to my own. And lo and behold, that guy, Michael Relf, I believe, if I'm saying his name right, got an MRI scan and then remembered a service on Mars, living on Mars. And I went and looked. I went, wait, I had an MRI scan. When was that? And I looked up my medical records, and it was about 10 days before my first email that I had my memories back. So coincidentally, I did get an MRI scan. I was having bad headaches, and they scanned me for it. So I'm thinking that there may be a technology that they inject in you that kind of like gives a fake memory. And when you go in the MRI, it deletes it. Magnetically, like it would delete it or break it up. Like there's something in there, like a hard drive. Like when you hold a magnet to a floppy disk, it erases it. So maybe there's a program that they put in you via chemicals, and it keeps the memories, keeps you from remembering. And then I went in the hard drive and it deleted that program, and I got my memories back shortly after. So maybe that's something to do with the technology. Maybe it's coincidence. I don't know. But that was what happened, and I got big chunks of memory. Like it came back all pretty much at once in big chunks. It was very debilitating for weeks after it began. Once it began, it kept coming. The more I would entertain memories, the more it would come, and not just a little bit of a vague. I'm talking about years of memories in one go, and big chunks of time. And I really had a hard time processing it, and it basically changed my personality. My personality kind of integrated those memories, and I became a different person. Like all of a sudden I had 20 years of knowledge too, on top of the person I was. So I integrated, I changed. And, my personal life followed suit. So years later, my wife married Tony Rodrigues. She didn't marry TonyRodrigues.com. And so it was more than she was comfortable with.
It's interesting to me that I did not go on these travels, but I was given all this stuff that you're talking about into the screenplay, and I didn't know where it came from. And you're going over element after element after erased memories, imprinted memories, all that stuff. And one of the things when I was downloading all this and putting into the thing that became the Matrix was, what did they do for recreation? Because one of the center themes was atrophy of the mind. If you don't have anything to release the mind into a relaxing state. And so I'm not making light of it. I'm saying this is a key element. I'm asking you, what was something you would do to relax the mind, recreational, anything maybe we not know of?
You mean during my time up there?
Yeah.
Thomas?
Yes, that's exactly it. That's what came to me, because when it came to me in the screenplay, when I was writing, I was asking, why is this coming forward? And why am I putting this in here? But it was given to me that this is an important element about what we do for recreation. Some of it came out pretty dark, and that's how you get Hunger Games. So I'm asking, what did you witness when you're up there as maybe as otherworldly recreation? Because some of it can get dark, but or if it was something
there is a network. There's a form of internet that is in the solar system that they have a news network that's solar system news, not Earth. There's no Earth in it. And they had their own forms of entertainment, their own sports events that are not on Earth. They had their own things that they tuned into. There was a red light district. There were bars. There are restaurants. There's a city with nightlife. There's stores, shoppings. There was a lot of that. I mean, it was a normal city. It was all just in a giant cavern inside a planetoid with fake gravity, with artificial gravity. Everybody had a phone. There were cell phones devices. They were clear, so it doesn't hurt your eyes if you look through a clear one. You know how you stare at a cell phone, your eyes will go bad. If it's clear, it doesn't do that. They had a little bit of a 3D effect, about an inch of 3D. It would stand up when you looked at it. But basically, when I got on the train to go to where I go see my girlfriend, and the doors closed and the train started, everybody got out their phone and played on it the same way that we do. And so they had their own internet. I didn't have access because I was slave labor, so I didn't have my own phone. Sometimes I had a tablet depending on the job, but for the most part, I didn't have access to their internet or their network. So I was really, spiteful about it. So I didn't, even the times that I could watch it, I didn't want to. I was like, why? It doesn't matter. So, but they had their own version of the internet.
I have a follow-up unless Susie has a question.
Yeah, Susie has a question. Hang on, Susie. All right, go.
Oh, you're muted, Susie. Susie, we can't hear you, hon.
Okay, I'm good now. I have to wait for Brenda to unmute me because my phone echoes back. So I remember the first time that I saw Jumanji 2, and I came back from the theater, and I was like, "Oh my God, that's you!" Because that 20 years that he gets stuck in the game, he goes in there and he can't get out of the game for 20 years, and I'm like, "That's Tony," and so they play that. It's 20 minutes. He's gone from here, but he's stuck in the game for 20 years when he comes back, right? So they write it all into the movies. It's so crazy. Now, my other question was this, Tony, did the extraterrestrials, did they like intermarry, mingle? Did they mix their races with each other? That's another question I had.
Excuse me. Oh, excuse me. I'm yawning. For the most part, no. So some races were very xenophobic in that regard. It tended to be species that had blue skin. They tended to live longer and be healthier than other species, statistically. And so as a result, they did not allow interbreeding to dilute the genetics. So it was a big deal to them. We always joked about, I'm going to see my girlfriend. She's blue. And, but there are other species that did, and there was interspecies sex. There was interspecies sexuality. So in the red light district, there were human girls that were in the places that were brothels, that were slaves taken from Earth in the same capacity that I was, and they were having ETs as customers. And there were many different There were many different ways that they did that. So there were some extraterrestrials where they didn't have physical sex; they had clear mental encounters, and that the girls had it was a lasting effect. That the girls there were some that were not allowed to be in there because they would leave the girls mentally handicapped after the encounter, and there were some that were the anatomy was brutal, so they wouldn't allow them. They weren't allowed to have sex with the girls, some ETs, because their anatomy. Um, I don't want to go into too much detail, but there were many different kinds that came in there because when you think about you're a trader and you're traveling in space and you go to another species and their solar system and you go and trade. If they have a red light district, you have the ability to try to. I mean, I'm speculating here. I'm on a limb here, but I think a lot of people might like to date a non-human at some point, an intelligent, beautiful non-human. The other thing is that the difference between Hollywood's depiction of extraterrestrials and the reality was that they tended to be far more beautiful pleasing to the eye than what Hollywood's are. So Hollywood's a guy in a rubber suit, and in reality, I remember seeing a reptilian that stood in line, and I thought it was extremely beautiful. It had a very fine, very detailed, very fine, small scales, very tiny scales, and it was beautiful. It had an iridescent effect, and I thought it was an amazing life form. And all of the intelligent ones tended to be something that could be handsome or beautiful, like their life, just like human. So at our level,
I'm sorry. I have a quick question. Did any of the reptilians that you were ever around, did they smell bad to you?
yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
I
So they have a smell, and they're aware of it, and they're aware of our disdain for the smell, and would make remarks about it. And yes,
because I know that if I've seen them in their little play human form and drop their face, but if they walk by me, I smell that smell, and it's one distinct smell, and I will never ever forget that smell. And I'll happen to look, and then they'll look back at me like they know I know. They know I know. And I'm like, oh, God. So, yeah, I was just wondering if it was something normal, if it was something that I just have a nose for, you know.
there are many different versions of reptilians, so many different species of that, and they don't all smell exactly the same. Some of them don't prefer to wear clothes. Many of them are xenophobic towards humans in general. They don't want to be around humans. They just don't. They just see us as a different species. Some of them find us delicious. There are reptilians that'll kill you dead and eat you, and they're smart, and they're just as smart as we are, bipedal reptilians. And others, I spent hours with a shorter reptilian, and he was a funny guy, and we became friends. We spoke, we got along great. And he said he went home to his world, to his planet every night when he was done working. That was just a job. And he had a wife and kids. He was the equivalent of like in his mid-20s in our years in his lifespan, which was different. And he was from a heavy gravity planet, so his planet was larger than ours. And so he had a short and stocky build. The ETs from heavy gravity worlds had a thicker, stocky build, and the ones from lighter, smaller worlds that had lighter gravity tended to be tall and skinny. But he said that's what his job. He was security because he came from a heavy gravity world. He was much stronger than us, so he was my security guard. So in case I was unruly or something bad happened, he would grab me up.
Susie, did you have anything else?
Just listening. I'm just listening. It's really, really interesting.
Okay, because we are starting to run out of time. So a couple more minutes, we can start wrapping it up here. Actually, Penny, we know where we can find you, the Awake Nation and Dark Outpost and here. Brian, where can everybody find you?
Let me share my screen because the main thing that I want everyone to know about, which is perfectly appropriate for our show here is the Full Disclosure Now conference in July, which is found at fulldisclosuremovement.org. And several of the people who've come up in this discussion with Tony, in addition to Tony, you've got Yeme Genet of the Farsight Institute will be there with us. And then another remote viewer, Jessica Jones and Arakim. So other survivors of these programs will definitely be there, Drago. And so I encourage everyone to find me on the Full Disclosure Movement.org website, please. Yep.
Okay. There we go.
Yep. And there's our Yeme Genet and Tony here in our lineup. Yep. This July in Florida.
All right. And then Tom, where can people find you?
That is a great question. I've been shredded by the agency. So my website's been struck twice. It's down. I can't even get on Twitter anymore and access my own account. So I've been silenced, but as far as media outlets, so God bless Penny and the rest. But basically, I've just been giving my phone number out at times, but my email is 77thetruemanshow. It's a Hollywood joke they put on me. So I used it at, gmail.com. So 77 the True Man Show was TRUE.
Yes, and you can also find them on the Awake Nation on our trauma triage team on Mondays, which is 10 to 11 Central, 11 to 12 Eastern. And then you can also find him every other Friday. He was on this Friday for a segment that is called the Dream Team. It's The Matrix meets Stranger Things, and where we discuss movie decodes. And then, of course, here, we are, our hours here are 9 to 11 Central, and that's 10 to 12 midnight East. I'm hearing a slap back.
Yeah.
And that's on YouTube. And if you want to contact us, you can always contact us at beyondthebox007@gmail.com. And then Susie is also on the Awake Nation on Fridays. And she's also going to be on the Dark Outpost, as is Tom Althaus. So the Dark Outpost is actually a subscription-based program. But Susie's segment is called Hot Shots, where she drops hot shots of intel.
Okay. And Tony, where can people find you?
Thanks. I have TonyRodrigues.com. It has links to some of my older episodes, my interviews originally. It links to my Patreon. I have a Patreon show that I put out, and it's Patreon Talks with Tony. You can find that through the website, TonyRodrigues.com, and I do consults, and there's links to both books. And I teach remote viewing on Sundays through my Patreon channel and remote influencing. And that's been great. That's been a great success. I love doing it. So the remote viewing, and like I said, my next book is should be done by the end of April, published by then. And it's a brief history of remote viewing, and it's going to tie in my time in the programs in the early 80s with Project Grow Flame. And so there's a lot of evidence. It's a book's worth of evidence. So looking forward to getting that out. And that's going to be the subject matter of a lot of my talks this year, is the tying the secret space program assets that I was into the early remote viewing and psychoenergetic research that the government and CIA was doing. And in fact, that I was active in the field in 83 and 84. So, but anyhow, TonyRodrigues.com should get you to anything you need to know. You can email me through there if anybody has any questions.
Okay. Boy, I got questions. I have to talk. And Susie, let's hear from you.
Oh, but you know what? I wanted to say, Tom, real quick. I believe that you must be a remote viewer, or you must see things, because for you to write what you wrote, you have to have seen these things. It's not a coincidence.
I believe you, Susie. I can't tell you where they came from. It's just like they just came, and I'm laughing and crying while I'm writing. And when Tony was doing this excellent interview of his now, it's like he's hitting all these different things that I was getting. So yeah, but thank you.
Yes, Tony, thank you so very much for appearing on our show and appearing on Susie's and Brenda's show as well.
Yes,
We
thank you
appreciate
so
you.
much for coming. I absolutely
Thank you.
enjoyed it, and you're welcome back anytime. So
Thank
we're
you.
going to go ahead
I'd
and
love
wrap it up, guys. Oh, yeah. Okay. We're going to wrap it up, guys. We are out of time, so we are going to go. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you guys tomorrow night. Have a good night.
Goodbye for now from Beyond the Box. Inside, outside, upside, downside, beyond the box.
Break it down.
Please join us again for Beyond the Box, Friday and Saturday evening from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Central, from 10 p.m. to 12 Eastern. Join us for more intel bombs with our extraordinary guests.
Break it down.
Inside, outside, upside, downside, beyond the box. Good night, Putin. Good night, Tucker Carlson.